You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth, one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hi, everybody. Welcome indeed to the show. So glad to have you here with us tonight. It's going to be a great show, and we're going to get right into it in just a moment. Want to just make a couple of quick little housekeeping notes, and that is, first of all, I would love for you to hit me up on Facebook and say hello. Send me a friend request. And if you appear to be a real person, I'll be happy to accept. Also, if you get a chance, hop over to NightVision Radio on Facebook and like us there. That helps us out a lot. And of course, go and like InceptionRadioNetwork.com or Inception Radio on Facebook, I should say, as well. Also want to mention that we're still gathering our small-ish group together for the trip to Southwest France in May. The tour dates are going to be May 10th through the 16th, and we'll be putting that up on the internet just very, very shortly as far as the itinerary goes. And you'll be able to see more about that as my co-guide on the trip, Gary Evans, will be posting lots of information very, very soon on his website, and that's infiniteconnections.co.uk. And Gary's well known in the traveling world. He's done lots of tours, lots of major tours all over the world with major authors, and I'm very fortunate to have him teaming up with me on this one. And of course, we will have some major authors on this tour. Mr. Henry Lincoln, the Grand Master of the Rennes Chateau and therefore the Da Vinci Code mysteries, will be on hand as usual, as well as Tim Wallace Murphy, who's another best-selling author and an expert in Templar history, as well as some of the bloodline family history, the Disposini. So we'll be talking with Henry and spending lots of time with Henry and Tim while we're there. We'll have some more surprises. Gary will be doing his thing, and you guys that know him know he has a real talent at some of these sacred sites. So I'll keep you posted. If you're interested in knowing about it before we get the itinerary out there, please send me a note either on my email at renekbarnett@gmail.com, and that's René with only one E on the end, RENEK Barnett @gmail.com, or just send me a message on Facebook. All right. Without any further delay, I'd like to get right into tonight's show because I have a guest that I'm so interested to speak with. We had a chance to chat a bit yesterday, and it was very enjoyable and very informative. And I wanted to save some of my questions for the show today because I had a million of them yesterday. And but we're going to get right into it. With me tonight is author Peter Moon. Peter, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here with you.
Well, I really appreciate it. And many of you will know Peter Moon by name, and some of you know him personally, but through the Montauk Project and a book that he and Preston Nichols wrote about that, as well as other books. But we're also going to talk about his new book, The White Bat, which is very, very interesting. And there's a real story a real white bat story to go along with that. So we'll get into that. But Peter, would you share some of your background with us? So sort of just to sort of set the stage.
Sure. I'm primarily known for co-authoring the book, The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time with Preston Nichols, which was published in 1992, published by my book company, Sky Books. And that's how I got started in the public business of the so-called paranormal. And that book, The Investigation of the Montauk Project, which was a series of mind control experiments where they were able to tap time and affect time travel primarily in the 1970s on Montauk Point, Long Island. I have began to investigate that project, and that has resulted in a plethora of other books on the subject, sequels to it, Montauk Revisited, Pyramids of Montauk, and also investigating the Nazi connection that took place at Montauk in a book called The Black Sun. And there have been several others, and that's primarily what I'm known for.
Oh, that sounds like an interesting one. I'm going to have to get that one. The Nazi connection. I mean, the Nazis were so interesting in some of their endeavors. Now, I don't know what their connection was to Montauk. It was probably pretty dark, but certainly their interest in sacred items and secret societies and bloodline families and things like that was of interest to me. How did they fit into the Montauk Project?
Well, that's a very good question, and I first came across it when I sat in a lecture that Preston Nichols was giving with Duncan Cameron, one of the primary Montauk psychic, and Al Bielek, who was in the audience that night. He was also involved in the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment. Now, they had mentioned that there were Nazis all over Montauk, and Nazis here, Nazis there. As I began to, and this was part of the lore of the Montauk Project, was the Nazi connection. Well, as I began to investigate further, the Nazis had the biggest stronghold outside of Germany, biggest presence in Long Island, in a town called Yaphank, Long Island. And that is right adjacent to Brookhaven National Laboratories, which also housed many German scientists that were repatriated after World War II. Some of you know as Project Paperclip. Now, the Nazis had a strong interest in Montauk Point going back to Kaiser Wilhelm, who built tunnels out there. But Kaiser Wilhelm was building tunnels. This was part of the Pan-Germanic movement that started after Otto von Bismarck and the Second Reich, which was to make Germany a world empire. This way before Hitler. So they were building, and all over across the world they had their little secret projects, and one of them was at Montauk. And there are a series of tunnels that are very ancient, and then there are less ancient ones. But the Kaiser Wilhelm had his little faction out there at Montauk. And then as far as Long Island went, Yaphank, Long Island, they had a place in Yaphank called German Gardens, where you had, and Camp Siegfried, which was not far from German Gardens, I mean, literally a stone's throw. So they had, the streets there were named after the Nazi notables, such as Adolf Hitler Boulevard. It's a street named after Goebbels.
Really?
Yes. And the only street that's left that has a German vestige is Schiller, who was a poet. They got rid of all the Hitler and Goebbels stuff, and there have been legal battles in Suffolk County on Long Island to remove this from the history and saying that it never was this way. Of course, they have not won that battle. So the history as it stands now is that those streets did exist at that time as those streets. Hitler Boulevard is now known as Park Boulevard. It's a very small little neighborhood street. But to be in German Gardens, you had to be German until about somewhere in the 1980s, when it was just racially discriminatory. that you know that other people could live there. When I began to investigate, I took signs that said pictures of signs that said Camp Siegfried, put it in my book, The Black Sun, and boy, did they remove that sign of Camp Siegfried real fast. It's almost as if they did not want this known. And right in this area of Camp Siegfried, they might have put the sign back up, I don't know, but there was a big Bavarian house, meeting house, and right outside there was a grass field which you could play soccer on. It wouldn't be a full soccer field, but you could have a game out there and play soccer. It's that big. And they used to do the Nazi goose stepping out there in the 1930s. And there were even meetings, and this I found out from one of the Montauk Indians, that because she used to write the reports to the House Un-American Activities Committee that would go there. She would write for the police. She worked for the police, and she said they had meetings there, and they were called Bonn meetings, B-O-N meetings. Now that was a very mysterious connection to the Nazis, because Karl Hausover was a Bonn priest, and Karl Hausover was the mentor of Rudolf Hess, and to an extent Adolf Hitler. He was the occult mentor, and he was the one that brought the Axis, and he was the Japanese into the Axis, because he spoke Japanese, and he had connections with Tibet and with the Japanese, and with the Black Dragon Society and whatnot, of those occult societies in the Asia. So this was Karl Hausover, and he was a Bonn priest. So here in the 30s and even in the 40s, they were having these Bonn meetings, which were Aryan type meetings, where you would have people wearing the regalia of the Tibetan priests, which is what they wear in the KKK, the regalia of Tibet. It's a mimicry. So this is the avenue that I was opening up in this book, The Black Sun, Montauk's Nazi-Tibetan connection, which is available on Amazon and through Lightning Source. But it's and from Sky Books as well. But the Tibetan connection was something that the Nazis were very fascinated with, and I found elements connecting it to Montauk, being that the ancient Tibetans were known as the Bon, and before they were known as the Bon, they were known as the Mon, M-O-N, and you see this word Mon transmogrifying into words like Manchuria, Mongol. So these are an ancient people, and these are the threads that I was discovering as I researched the connection between from the Nazis at Montauk. Of course, it gets esoteric and corresponds with some of the interesting things you've seen with the Ark of the Covenant and in the movies and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah. Now, someone in the chat room, Neutron, is asking, is the name Ostara the movement that you're talking about? This pre-Nazi movement?
Ostara was a publication, as I recall, an astrological publication in early pre-Nazi Germany.
Oh,
and
I think, yes.
There might have been a group called Ostara, but what was really significant about that time period was the Vril Society. Again, a society started by Karl Hausover. Now, if you read the standard plebeian history on the Nazis and the Vril Society, it will not say that Karl Hausover is the head of it. I only say this to you based upon what I learned from my contacts in Germany, the German sources, because the Germans like the Montauk Project, and they published the Montauk Project, and I have enjoyed certain contacts with these people. Anyway, he was a member of the Black Sun, and that was their secret society, one of the most secret societies. Out of that, on two societies at least, the Vril Society and the Thule Society, Thule. Sometimes people mispronounce it Thule, but it was known by the Germans as the Thule Society. And after Thule, which was the capital city, according to lore, of Hyperborea. Now, the land beyond the poles. Now, I've since discovered that Hyperborea is not the land beyond the poles such as they presented it or thought it was. Hyperborea to the Greeks referred to the land north of the Danube. And the land north of the Danube is Romania. And more specifically, Hyperborea referred to the land, the core of Hyperborea was beyond the Carpathians, which is the land we know now as Transylvania. And that's a whole, that the Nazis missed the boat. They did get their oil from the Romanian fields, but they missed the boat on the esotericism of what they were really looking for. It was right in front of their face. It was in their national possession, but they didn't understand Transylvania. They were repelled from there by the energies that exist there to this very day. But that's another story, which brings us more in fast forwards into my more recent work. But
Sure.
But the Thule Society and the Vril Society, and the Vril Society was founded on the abilities of different women who were able to serve as transmediums, and they would basically channel UFO technology or flying saucer technology. And this became the foundation of the German flying saucer technology. Now, when this book, The Black Sun, was published in 1997, it was very controversial. It included the photographs of some of these crafts. And now, I was not the first.
And this is a Project Paperclip we're talking about, right?
This is not Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip is when the Nazi scientists were smuggled out of Nazi Germany and brought to America to work on various projects.
That's right. Nazi technology
That's the repatriation of the Nazi scientists that were working, such as Werner von Braun was the poster boy for that.
Yep.
And they worked eventually on the American space program, and some would say sabotaged it and kept it in check. But they were that was Project Paperclip. The Vril Society, I mean, some of those people were obviously members of the Vril Society, but they were more on the technological end. The core of the Vril Society were the mediums and the people. Rudolf Hess was a financier of the Vril Society. He raised the money for it, and there was publications in a magazine, I think it was called Atlantis, or the equivalent thereof in the German language. And Hess used to lecture on UFO technology. He was quite knowledgeable, and in the latter days of his life in Spandau prison, he would get detailed technical write-ups and information from the German scientists who respected his knowledge, his technical knowledge, although he wasn't a scientist per se. He grew up in a merchant family, and he was the financier of the Nazi Party, and that was part of the reason he was kept alive, and not only kept alive, but not allowed to come out, because he was a signatory and knew where all the Nazi funds were. So he and those funds had to be sequestered from the German interests by the British nationals. And I wrote about this in a book called Spandau Mystery, which is a novel based upon history, the actual history of Rudolf Hess, General Patton discovering the technology of the Nazis, and that's part of the reason he was silenced, or the main reason he was silenced. Of course, some of the novel is speculative, but it's based upon historical data, because I couldn't get at all the relevant truths. So I've done a lot of delving into the Germans, and I've even spoken there in Bavaria to a group of Germans, which was a very enjoyable experience for me.
Great. Now, the Montauk Project, was that primarily, I know it was sort of a mind control, but was the largest part of it the time travel aspect, or were there other things that they were doing? I know that there was some experimentation, I believe, in teleportation, which seems sort of related in some ways.
Yes, the time travel happened. It was one of the later developments. And as you begin to investigate anything, if you're on a true path of discovery, you learn more. You have unexpected new things break out that you can learn or understand. The Montauk Project, the roots of the Montauk Project are in the Philadelphia experiment, which was a result of combined efforts of German and American efforts to create a warship that would become invisible. Of course, the Germans were not involved in the latter part of the experiment in the 40s, although there are some stories where the Germans do fit into it. But primarily, it was done under the auspices of the umbrella of the United States Navy. And this was to make a warship appear invisible to radar. And when it did appear invisible to radar, it was subjected to radio frequencies which affected the mind of men, and they went splooey. So there was a whole human factor study on human beings that was primarily done after the war had calmed down. And it was done at Brookhaven Labs, where some of the sailors who were injured were taken to Camp Upton. It was a convalescent hospital of the Navy. Camp Upton was this World War I outpost in Yaphank. Irving Berlin wrote a song about it because he was stationed there. But then what was Camp Upton became Brookhaven National Laboratory, the premier nuclear research facility in the United States. And it is currently under the Department of Energy. It used to be run by Allied Universities, or a name like that. It was a quasi-government agency, but it was a bunch of university scientists and whatnot. And it was a very high secure area. And they also got the rights to Victor Schauberger's technology. Schauberger was the scientist behind so much of the technology. I can't delineate what his role with the Vril Society was, if any, and the technology that was coming out of the Vril girls. But he was, they got his patents and whatnot at Brookhaven Labs. I believe the guy's last name was Donner who did it. It's in the book, The Black Sun. But the Brookhaven was a very strong German component, as I say, right next door with the German gardens and Camp Siegfried. So you had a science group there, a research group, that was also taking the work of the Nazis from the captured German documents that involved the work of Joseph Mengele. And they were using the studies of twins, the studies of mind control, the studies of human sexuality, and they also used the studies of Wilhelm Reich. I think he was an Austrian scientist. He was an Austrian psychiatrist. And he was a medical doctor, and he developed orgone therapy. And he was quite extreme in what he discovered, but they were using his technology. They were using all of this to penetrate the mind of man, to study the mind of man, to hook it up to the computers of the day, the early computers of the day, and to enable and to amp up the thoughts of people, the thoughts of subjects, so that it could actually read out on a computer screen and print out on a computer. This was very early, crude technology that was using vacuum tubes as well in connection with the radio frequency, but it developed over a period of years in the 50s to the point where they became very effective at mind control. And
now I understand the connection, of studying twins, because I would imagine it has something to do with that sort of mind sharing things that twins kind of do, that intuitiveness about each other, feeling each other's pain, knowing what the other person is going to say, that sort of thing. But how did human sexuality come into that whole mind control thing? I mean, I guess in some ways it's kind of obvious, but I just wonder.
Well, the sexual energy is creational energy. It's the energy of creation, literally creation. That's how you create.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
But it is a very powerful energy as well. The whole
Well, I guess in the way that it's used in, some ritual and things of that nature, that might have been part of what they were looking at, because that using sex in a ritual, I guess, what is that called? Oh goodness, I can't remember the term.
Sexual magic is one term
Yep.
was coined more or less by Aleister Crowley. And there was also...
Isn't there something called Heros Gamos or something like that?
I don't know that term. The Wiccan, the whole foundation of Wicca is based upon sexual magic. And this is not a new idea. But if you look at the Christian theology, it is based upon one of the highest forms of sexual magic, which is which occult magicians aspire to. This is the seed of, in the Christian theology, the Divine Father facilitating what's called the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary, a virgin birth, where he basically incarnates himself in the personage of a son through a female by using something other than sexual intercourse. But this is a form of sexual magic. This is the most supreme idealized creation in the Christian theology, which is, as I say, aspired to by other magicians. That's considered and magicians who aren't Christian at all. But that is, so sexuality and the mimicry of it is considered a very potent form of psychic potential and power. So when you begin to play with these energies in the East, Asia, they know it as Tantra, which is also known as the yoga of sex. And yoga is union, and it is the harnessing. Yoga also means yoke, which is like when you put the yoke on a ox and you control it. It's a matter of achieving union and controlling energies so that you can achieve a divine union with the divinity. So this, in the Tibetan tradition, this equates to being sublimated into certain powers of influence. And this is not new stuff. What was particular about Montauk is they were playing with these energies and they were seeking to use them towards their advantage. And they were using them and mixing them with other disciplines, anything that was occult, anything that where people could manifest power and influence, because this is also military power and influence as well.
Got it. We're going to take a break really quick. By the way, listeners, it was Heros Gamos that I was referring to, which is a Greek term, and it is a ritual where people, it doesn't presuppose that you're going to actually perform the sex act, but it could be acted out symbolically, or it could be acted out for real. But it's, supposes that people are sort of representing deities.
I understand what you're talking about now that you...
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Anyhow, we're going to take a quick break. We're talking with Peter Moon. We're talking about time travel. We're talking about sex. And we're talking about everything. So we'll be right back. Hang in there with us.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to NightVision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett. My guest tonight is Peter Moon. He's the author, co-author of Montauk Project, and the author of The White Bat, his most recent book. We've been talking about the Montauk Project and some Nazi involvement there, and also sort of some what I would term, sort of metaphysical aspects to the whole thing. Now, when we're talking about time travel, are we talking about mechanics, or are we talking about metaphysics, or mind, or what are we talking about?
Very good question. It's a very good question, because the one thing is the word metaphysics, which is a word that has never been too well understood, but of course it means meta, above physics. It's senior to physics, which the very etymology of the word suggests that there is something superior to the physical world itself. So it's when a word comes about, there's a reason that somebody made a word. You can't have a word without a concept. So there's the concept that there's something above physics. When you talk about time travel, you are putting affectation or a circumstance that is senior to the physical universe as we know it. Now, what they were doing at Montauk was playing with the mind. They were investigating the mind. They were experimenting with the mind. And the way time travel research developed there was by trying to manifest objects, and then they would manifest, but they would manifest out of the congruence of time. So this began a window into time. So if I want you to think of a blue bottle, and the blue bottle appears, but maybe it didn't appear, maybe it appeared 2 days after the experiment, or maybe it appeared in the past. This was a window into time. And of course, when you have harness one bit of energy on something, you then begin to explore it and exploit it. And so this, according to the legends, traditions, and historical accounts, that this is indeed what happened, is that doors were open to other periods of time. We know from mathematics that this is not implausible.
And when the experimentation was being done at Montauk, how were they affecting, or were they attempting to affect time travel?
How were they?
Yeah. How did they? Did they have a time machine? Did they just experiment with people's minds?
Okay, they had a psychic subject, Duncan Cameron, who was subjected to put in what was called the Montauk chair, and he had a series or set of radio receivers, crystal receivers. You have to understand that radios are all based upon crystal technology.
Yes.
And they would pick up his thoughts. They would amplify his thoughts. The mechanics and machinery of this, generally, mechanics and whatnot, is in the book, The Montauk Project Experiments of Time. This is the language of Preston Nichols, which I was able to decipher and help him communicate into more simple English of what was going on there. And, amping up somebody's thoughts and broadcasting it out a transmitter, which was a very powerful transmitter. Now, what had happened with these broadcasts, it would affect the moods of people and animals in the area. And you had animals going wacko. You had deer charging the city, crashing into one window in a place called Salivars, where they had the picture, a mural of a deer crashing into the window. It was a famous incident that happened there. One was reported crashed into a phone booth, and you had people acting wacky out there. That people still act wacky out there to this day at Montauk. It's a wacky place. It's a beautiful place. It's but the people there.
And what do you think they're still affected? Is there some kind of residual energy there or something?
Well, Montauk, and this gets into the third book, Pyramids of Montauk, because I found out through all of my investigations, which was the result of a lot of synchronicity, that there were pyramids at that point at one point in time. And I found a picture of them, but there was no explanation. I finally found a woman in the Montauk tribe, the tribe that had been declared extinct, who told me that her grandfather knew about those pyramids, and he used to talk about them, and that they used to perform rituals. They had an underground chamber in those pyramids. And this was a sacred spot. The family name of the Montauk Indians, they were the royal tribe of Long Island. And some say even the royal tribe of America. And which was, according to at least one source, was known as Montauk itself at one point. But the entire North America. But Long Island they were the royal tribe, and they were known as the Pharaohs. the pharaohs. And so there was a connection to Egypt. The shaman of the tribe, Sharon Redberg Jackson, told me that she had seen in a book when she was young, she was taught that they had come from Egypt. So there is this was a very sacred spot, Montauk is a mountain. It's not part of Long Island. It was known as an island. There's an isthmus east of Amagansett, and that isthmus has since been filled in, and it's just like one continuous stream of land. But it was originally an island, and it's on the top of a mountain. Now,
do you think there's something particular about the geography or the geophysics of that area? Do you think that there are telluric currents there, or as Carol in the chat room has asked, is it on ley lines? Is there any involvement like that?
Oh yes. And Long Island was very strong in telluric energy lines. This is why Tesla came to Long Island to build his tower, the Wardenclyffe Tower, which is probably about an hour away from Montauk on the north shore of Long Island, and there's a huge underground tunnel system where that is, which became, didn't become exactly the Shoreham nuclear power plant, which is near there. So Tesla has a whole lab that I think somebody has purchased to turn it into a historical landmark.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I know it was up for sale a couple of years ago. I did some filming out there for a show that I worked on, a conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura. We did a piece on Tesla. So that's a real interesting place there as well. Now, is there a Tesla connection to all this? Is there a Tesla time travel connection?
Well, Tesla is, according to the core story, was the original scientist who was putting the Philadelphia experiment together. And this is in the 30s, and the late 30s, early 40s, and he bowed out of the experiment due to he knew that it would be disastrous to human beings. And Tesla died 43 before the experiment took place. It was the directorship of the experiment was turned over to John von Neumann, and Tesla had a lot of issues with the American government.
Oh, that's an understatement.
And the person you can talk to about that is Douglas Dietrich, because he gave all of his technology to his native country, which was then Yugoslavia. He's Croatian. Croatia became a part of Yugoslavia, and this begat the secret Yugoslavian space program, which Douglas Dietrich talks about that on one of his lectures, which is utterly fascinating. In why was Yugoslavia able to stand so strong against the Soviet Union and be such an outcast in the communist world, but yet maintain its position? So that's Tesla technology. But so Tesla was involved in death rays, part of what's become HARP, and he was vilified as an evil scientist in the Superman cartoons. They used to have Tesla. That evolved later into Lex Luthor. They got off the Tesla bandwagon. And there's even a movie where Bela Lugosi plays a vampire called Tesla. Oh. This is he was being vilified in this period of early World War II.
Oh, he was. And I mean, one of his big detractors was Thomas Edison. I was hearing I guess there's a book that's been written about Tesla that has been released recently, and the gentleman was on NPR today, and he was talking about how Thomas Edison was trying to somehow put down Tesla by going around and publicly electrocuting dogs and cats and saying,
Yes, this
you've
is
just
very-
you've just been Westinghoused, or you've just been Tesla'd.
This is very old news. I mean, that's been in the old books about him. That's not new news.
But
that's very
the
early
funny
on.
thing was that his sort of response to it was to do these public exhibitions of running electricity through himself, and never involved any other people or animals or anything. And so he'd have these sparks shooting out of his head, and of course nobody wanted to shake his hand after the demonstration. But I thought it was kind of interesting that I'd never heard that about Thomas Edison doing that sort of thing.
I mean, this is very old news. I mean, this is.
I guess I'm behind the times, because I didn't know that.
Book you'll pick up, you'll find how Edison tried to vilify with his public of Tesla with his public electrocution of dogs. This is what Edison would do. But I mean, this is old news. And yes, it's definitely true though. But Tesla was vilified by Edison and more later by the United States government itself. And Tesla's one weakness, and this is a very interesting weakness as a human being, was politics. He was not a political power. So people will attack political strong people who often use illegal Machiavellian means to accomplish. Tesla did not use those means, and this was made him vulnerable. But that's a whole nother story.
Oh yeah. Goodness. So there was absolutely a Tesla connection to all this that we're talking about. Now, what about the whole synchronicity thing? How does that play in?
Well, synchronicity came into my life in a big way when I began to investigate the Montauk Project experiments and the first book, because the book was Preston's story based upon years and years of research, a decade of research, and it was also sort of a consensus story of what he gathered from other people. There were a lot of people involved in the Montauk Project and the stories that developed, and it was my job basically to listen to Preston's stories that he'd accumulated over the years in his own research and whatnot. And Preston is not the type of person that's going to dot his I's and cross his T's so well. He's more interested in what he's interested in. He's not a journalist. He's not always going to objectify everything. He's a part mad scientist. So and some of the phenomena he would encounter did not lend itself towards verification. I was much more interested in verifying things. And when I sought out to verify these things, the first thing you find is the data trail has been hidden, deliberately obscured, or shredded. And what I began to experience with was synchronicity, coincidences of names. And this began with my first meeting with Preston Nichols and his story that himself and Duncan Cameron, who basically broke this story with the help of Al Bielek, that they were the Wilson brothers in a past life, and that they worked for Aleister Crowley's father, or they had a company with Aleister Crowley's father in that eventually became the Thorn EMI company, who released the Philadelphia Experiment movie on video. And so this began a whole series of synchronicities of looking for the name Wilson and finding that Aleister Crowley was friends with a man named Duncan Cameron, and that Edward Alexander Crowley was his real name, which was the same names as Edward Cameron and Alexander Cameron, who were part of the Philadelphia Experiment story. So I had these names, but then those initial coincidences with those names began to become stronger and stronger and stronger with different experiences which I would have. And all of these culminated in my meeting a woman named Cameron, who's Marjorie Cameron, the wife of Jack Parsons. She was the magical partner of Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard in an effort called the Babylon Working. So,
And Jack Parsons was a big OTO guy, right?
yeah, he was the primary person in the OTO in the early 1940s. He eventually found his way out of the OTO. The Ordo Templi Orientis, we should say, for those people who are not familiar with the Ordo Templi Orientis, which basically means the Order of the Temple of the East.
Yeah.
And it is, they claimed adherence or a legacy to the Knights Templars of Solomon's Temple. But Aleister Crowley was a inspiration and a mentor to Jack Parsons in a magical sense. Jack called himself his magical son, and he broke away from Crowley. He broke away from Crowley and became a renegade magician himself. He is the person who's most responsible for our modern rocket program with his basically invention of the solid fuel rocket as opposed to a liquid fuel rocket, which is a slow burn. So Parsons had a whole agenda to explore the moon. He has a crater on the dark side of the moon named after him, and he is one of the initial founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which people like to say is the JPL, Jack Parsons Laboratory.
Oh, I never thought of that.
Yes, and he is one of the founding fathers of the JPL.
Yes.
So this is, but anyway, my synchronicities led back to Marjorie Cameron, who told me that her real last name was Wilson, and so was L. Ron Hubbard. He was really a Wilson too. So these synchronicities resulted in a book I wrote to try and explain them called Montauk Revisited: Adventures in Synchronicity. So synchronicity became a hallmark of my experiences and my career as a writer. Did I have experiences in synchronicity prior to investigating Montauk? I think we all did. But after this, they became very significant and very important and noteworthy because I had become a writer who was writing about them. Whereas before, a coincidence is a coincidence. My brother and I both married a woman named Nina Ann. So, that was, and my first wife we were born in the same hospital. So, you have synchronicities in your life, but this is, the synchronicities began to become more significant and more pronounced as I began to investigate the Montauk Project, as I began to investigate time, because you understand that the word synchronicity, which was coined by Carl Jung, means time together or synchronizing time. Chronos is time, chronicity. Sync is to bring into synchronization or to bring together. Mm-hmm. So this is what you're doing. If you're studying time, you're bringing time together. Carl Jung is the one who coined the word synchronicity. And although he would not refute what I just said about time, the definition of the etymology of it, he said that the word was a precursor to the Tao, the Chinese word, the Tao, T-A-O, pronounced Tao, as in Dow Jones. But it was, you're taking a pathway to the ultimate principle of existence, which the Chinese called the Tao. And so Montauk, and if you look in the Montauk Revisited at the beginning of the book, it will say that the Tao is the mystery behind all mysteries. So Montauk is full of mystery, as we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes or whatever. It's full of mystery, but and people often get sidetracked by all of the electronics, all of the occult lore, all of the mysteries of 10,000 things that they might say in the Tao. But the real mystery behind all mysteries is very simple, and it's the Tao. And this is what we should be seeking, not the complexities of mind control and torture and how screwed up people can get inside their heads by the victimization that was perpetrated by these unsultry characters.
Now, you said when you started investigating or researching time, you started experiencing more synchronicities, not necessarily just noticing more, but actually having more synchronicities. Is that right?
That's true, because one is going on a pursuit of an investigation, and that investigation creates a resonant rapport or a law of attraction. So you're attracting the truth in a way. You're attracting the secrets, and some of these secrets get quite deep. They traced back into. They actually manifested. I manifested a synchronicity that tied all the way back to the death of my parents and my early out-of-body experiences, which is the subject of a book called the Montauk Book of the Living. That's a whole nother story. Everything was related in my life to the olive, the mystery of the olive, the Mount of Olives. My out-of-body experiences were on Olive Drive. My parents were killed on the land of the olives. They were buried on the land of the olives in California, Los Olivos Adobe, or Adobe Los Olivos. That's the olive family. So, and then the matriarch of the Montauk Indians was Olive Pharaoh, and Olive Pharaoh died on the day she received my second edition of my book, Pyramids of Montauk, of a bleeding gallbladder. At the same time, I was reading a piece of paper that said the olive oil will heal the gallbladder. So all these synchronicities with the olive, and of course, all of this was precipitated by a playbill from the new Montauk Theater, which was a playbill that was handed to me. And stashed in this playbill, it was framed, was a picture of Jesus on the Mount of Olives. It took me a year to discover this mysterious picture lurking behind there, and it all came out of me in front of Duncan Cameron, the Montauk psychic. He just happened to be at my house, and I asked him to try and give me a psychic read on this playbill, and it turned out that this picture, it came out. The thing fell apart when I gave it to him, and out came this picture of Christ on Mount Olive. There were two pictures of Christ on Mount Olive, which caused me to investigate olives, Mount Olive, and all of the associated lore with the olive. So this is the most sacred object in Christianity, Judaism. It's also sacred with Islam and the Greek religion. It's the foundation of the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, which Eliot has to do with olive. So this is when you talk about synchronicity, boy, this gets into real deep sacred core stuff, because this is the foundational magic. If you look at religion, which means to link back to, people think it means to bind to, but it means to link back to. The Latin word religioso, and to link back to the original cause. And all of this stuff linked back to the original cause. And of course, if one is doing that, one's going to have moments in life. Because although I've relayed my experiences, which might seem particularly interesting or noteworthy, there's people that have had far more incredible experiences than I've just laid out. Mine are laid out in a form of literature because I'm a writer. But there have been people that have had dramatic experiences, which may or may not be as good as mine. It's not really a thing of compare. The point is we're all tied to original cause. And so when we're all tied to original time, we're all tied to non-original time, because we're all stuck in time, or we're placed in time, or we're aware of having been there, and we're agile in time. But we all have the potential to figure out where we came from. And so basically, this is what synchronicity will do. When you begin to investigate synchronicity, you will precipitate more synchronicity. And by the way, it's important.
Peter, can you hold that thought for just a moment? We're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to finish this thought, and then I want to definitely get into your book, The White Bat, because that's of some real interest, I know, to the listeners, and a bit about the Romanian Sphinx.
Sure.
If that's okay. All right, everybody, we'll be right back. Hang in there with us, please.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best. Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Welcome back to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett. My guest tonight is Peter Moon. He's an author and a researcher into all things mysterious, including time travel, synchronicity, and the like. Now, did you have something else you wanted to add on that synchronicity note, Peter?
Yes, it's just a sentence or two, and that's that there is a science of synchronicity or a study of synchronicity, and it's known as astrology. And that is, and astrology is a very deep subject, which is often held to ridicule only because of people who don't understand it. And sometimes that includes the people who advocate it. But that's a whole nother subject. But it's all about synchronicity, and it's acausal as opposed to causal. This is two principles in science. Science is causal, which is your ordinary cause and effect. There's also acausal, or nonlinear experiences which manifest. And this is scientifically recognized. So we're not going to digress onto astrology now. But you wanted to bring up, somebody had a question in the chat room. You said about
that's right. Someone, and forgive me, it might have been American Road Warrior. It might have been Neutron. I'm not sure. And
It doesn't matter.
don't want to take the time to scroll back. But they were asking about what your opinion, and it seemed like everyone in the room was interested in what your opinion of Al Bielek's accounts is. You know, as you know, he's a bit of a controversial figure. He's had lots of detractors, but you know him. So can you shed some light on Al Bielek for us?
Well, Al Bielek passed away. He's passed away now, but Al was a very sincere person. A lot of what he stirred up in his investigation of such subjects goes back to the 50s, and he was involved in the Dianetics movement, which stirred his mind up and made him look at things. And he'd been investigating this stuff for a long, long time. He discovered that he had a connection to this Philadelphia experiment after he met Preston and Duncan. And he independently associated himself with the Cameron brothers at the same time Preston and Duncan had figured out independently. So Al had come up with some important things. He was the one who brought Senator Barry Goldwater's nephew into the Montauk investigation. And Al, but he wasn't always right. Preston considered Al a very good psychic. He was good with machines. But Al was capable of being a human being. He could misfire. And the same thing can happen with Preston Nichols. You can hear him say things and you can go and they don't check out. And it's because this is shooting from the hip. It's nonlinear investigation. But Al Bielek, they set him up on Coast to Coast one time. I was warned 24 hours before he went on Coast to Coast that they were going to slam him. And it was all set up to build him up. And he was tricked. So I warned him before he went on because I got word back through the industry. And he went on there and he predicted that there would be a blackout, a major blackout between the 10th and the 14th of August during the biorhythm of the Montauk Project. That was between the 10th and the 14th, the Philadelphia experiment, and the Montauk Project would have this biorhythm that would occur every year. And I forget the year this was. I think it was 2003. It was the big blackout. Wow. And he was right. He said between the 10th and the 14th. It was on the 14th of August. So Al could be right. Do I believe everything he said? No, sometimes he was wrong. But you shouldn't believe anything. What Al would say would just be data. Sometimes it would check out and sometimes it wouldn't. But he was very passionate and he was very sincere. And he has to be taken with a grain of salt. But then again, look at Stephen Hawking. He's been he says time travel is not possible, and then he has to recant his statement. He keeps changing his position. So does that mean that all the Newtonian physics is baloney? No, because he's an advocate for Newtonian physics. But people are wrong, and people are sometimes right. So that I hope that covers Al Bielek.
Thank you very much. I think it does. I think that covers it nicely. You know, gosh, we're down to almost the last 20 minutes of the show, and I don't want to miss talking about your new book and the story that you told in The White Bat. It's really interesting, and involved in that story is a place in Romania. Now, I posted a picture on my Facebook page and I just posted it in the chat room it was what's called the Romanian Sphinx. And if you want to give us a little bit of information on what that is, and then maybe go back then and get us into the story.
Well, I'm going to go back to the blackout of 2003 that Al predicted. And there was a big blackout in New York. The center point, I mean, this was a huge blackout. They were talking about changing the whole grid. And the center of it was Preston's new home in Cairo, New York. Cairo. He moved to Cairo, New York, which they like to call Cairo. Anyway, that at the same time that big blackout was happening, this was the big blackout everybody was waiting for who followed the Montauk Project. It goes 1943, 1983, 2003. What was going to happen in 2003? Well, we had a big blackout on Long Island and New York City and the whole East Coast, center around Cairo, New York, up to Buffalo, into Ohio. But there was also something going on in the country of Romania in August of 2003. And this was the discovery of a chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx. And this is in the mountains of the Carpathian Mountains, sort of a little bit where they curve up from the going west to east, and then they start to go north and south. This is not far from the citadel that the famous Vlad, or Count Dracula as we know him, used to have a fortress that would go in and out from Transylvania to Wallachia. It was the passageway that he was his citadel. It was not his castle, but it was a citadel, a fortress. Now, the Sphinx is a rock formation that on one side looks like a person, on the other side looks like a lion or a griffin. Just like the Egyptian Sphinx is part man, part lion. It looks like it's naturally carved by the wind, but some of it looks like it's carved by man. It's very old. It's supposed to be 50,000 years old. And people like to argue over whether it's an artifact or just a freak of nature. But there are also other megaliths up in that area, a lot of legends, a lot of stories. But underneath this, they found a chamber. Now, this is at the highest level of security of the governments of Romania and America. America discovered the chamber, and with the Pentagon's technology of ground-penetrating radar from satellites. And there was a chamber that was discovered there with holographic technology, holographic records of time. Now, I'm going to short-circuit this story because it's told in a book called Transylvanian Sunrise by a Romanian author who was part of the project which was allowed to see it. And this is a whole dramatic story that I've talked about on many radio shows. But I was brought over there 5 years after that discovery by a time travel scientist named Dr. David Anderson. And Dr. David Anderson is featured in The White Bat because he's the one who brought me to Romania, where I began to investigate the Sphinx. Now, I was not able to access that chamber. I was not able to see all of the wonderful things described in that book, although I did maintain a correspondence with the author for a considerable amount of time before he sort of disappeared. But I have made trips to Romania, 8 trips from 2008 annually. I made 2 last year. And when I went over there in 2013, I was writing a book called The White Bat, based upon a dream I had had in 1989 before I got involved in any of this time travel stuff. And this dream was of going to Dracula's citadel and pursuing him and catching him after he turned into a bat, and then the bat turned white. And then he turned white. He became the antithesis of Dracula. If we have the Christ, we have the Antichrist. If we have the Antichrist, we have the Christ. If we have the Dracula, we have the anti-Dracula. And when I say Dracula and anti-Dracula, I must be very careful that my dream was based upon the Hollywood versions that most of you are familiar with. This is in stark contrast to the real character, who is a historical character who is not the same as is portrayed in the movies. And he is a national hero in Romania because he saved the Romanians from the Turks, who were enslaving the Christian people of Romania. So was he a dark character? Yes, he was. But he was also doing a job that nobody else would or could do. So I don't want to go down the Dracula side tunnel here, but the White Bat dream, I wrote a story, and I realized that I was being brought to Romania long before I got involved in it, involved in time travel. And yet I would find stories of time travel in Romania that's mentioned in the books. And when I got to Romania in 2013, it would have been my 6th trip, it was during that August biorhythm. It was August 10th. And I'm telling this guide, who's going to be our guide, through an interpreter, of my dream about the white bat, how I was brought to his country. I was being brought there already. He was already familiar with my work because it's been translated into Romanian. And he said that a young girl had just seen a white bat 4 days earlier in a cave. And the cave had particular significance. But anyway, so I said, wow, this was a white bat. It appeared there. And then somebody who was with her said it wasn't a white bat. She insisted the white was bat. The bat was white. And so I included this adventure in my story, which summarizes all of my adventures in Romania. There's been 5, this is the 5th book on my Romanian adventures, which most of these books are by a Romanian author, these first 4 books. There's this Transylvanian Sunrise, the Transylvanian Moonrise, Mystery of Egypt, Secret Parchment, and now the White Bat. And these are incredible adventures which center around time. In the 4th book, underneath the sacred site in Transylvania, which I've been to 5 times, Sarmasejituza, there is huge gold deposits. Now, these gold deposits are not controversial as to whether or not they exist. This book, The Secret Parchment, describes them as tunnels of pure gold that are carved out or look like they're carved out. They feature hieroglyphics. They feature a location that is said to be the center of time, and with great mysteries in it. So this is the theme of time comes up, and it all comes by way of this mysterious dream I had of a white bat. And that's what the book is about, and it's available on Kindle, and of course through Amazon or through skybooks.usa.com, which is my website, skybooks.usa.com.
That's great. And if anyone is looking and can't find it, just send me a quick note and I'll be sure and refer you to Peter's sites. I've posted those also in the chat room so that people can avail themselves. And people have been commenting on your books and how many, you're a pretty prolific author.
I published 20 books, and my name's as a co-author on about 16 or 17 of them. I can't keep track anymore. But
yeah, it's amazing.
There's a lot of books, and they're all on that website, skybooks.usa.com. And I need to put up a catalog there because it gives sort of a history of Skybooks, how all of this stuff evolved and developed. I've been writing and publishing for 23 years. And now I have to go back over everything and sort of refine everything. And I have a lot of knowledge and experience to draw upon as I move forward into the next stage of my life. Now, I should add that I've added 2 podcasts to my website, digitalmontauk.com, 2 podcasts on the subject of remote viewing. And
now, you mentioned that to me on the phone in our pre-interview, and you were saying that this is a different approach. I mean, we've all, by now fairly familiar with the military's program on remote viewing, but you're talking about something very different.
Well, I'm basically telling all these people they think they know about remote viewing. And no, it's not quite the way they think it is. And I advise people to listen to the podcast. The 3rd one will come out next week. That sort of sums it up. I can even go into a 4th one possibly. But the remote people that are doing the remote viewing or telling you that they're doing the remote viewing are not quite what the general public has thought they were. They're not quite the characters that you think they are. And this is what I have to say. I don't know if we have the time to go into it, but all as I would say is that the person who's most responsible for making that movement happen was Ingo Swann. And I knew Ingo Swann from Scientology because I was in Scientology. He was by the time I got into Scientology in 1971, he was a very active member and had helped create the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles, which is the place that all the celebrities now go to in Hollywood that are interested in Scientology. Scientology was completely and utterly different back then than it is now. And he was a strong member of Scientology, a very strong member. And he later claimed that he wasn't or distanced himself from it. And this was all BS. He was very much involved in it. And he was the one who did the initial remote viewing experiments that garnished all this publicity. Now, there was another occult side to Ingo that people really don't know about. And I sort of go into that in the podcast. And he was... he did have definite psychic abilities. He was an affable person, but he was also a strong opponent of the Montauk Project revelation of that information. And this I know from Preston Nichols, who was approached by Ingo Swann, who told him not to look into it, under a different name. And Ingo was also involved with occult societies and people. I don't know to what, if he was a member with them or not, but he was not what he appeared to be. And I just point out that when you're getting into the out-of-body experience or the remote viewing experience, you're dealing with a very high potential of spirituality. And these people were all dealing with war and armaments. And I would only refer them to the Buddhist texts, which advise you not to deal in armaments. Don't deal in tobacco. Don't deal in alcohol. Don't deal in armaments. Don't deal with the ATF. You can do what you want to do. But I'm saying, when people kind of like, wow, it's like, what are these people dealing with war games for? If you even consider that war games are, legitimate. It's not what you think it is. And they're not heroes. And they're usually...
And when you say they're not heroes, are you talking about the remote viewers for the government?
Yes, they're not heroes. They're not heroes.
Well, I don't know, that they would argue with that. I do know some of those guys, and one quite well, and a couple of others not quite as well, through my involvement with them in various, films and television programs, and then just knowing them for years. And I would say, in some ways, I think some of them have gone into a more, a more spiritual mode than they were in back in those days, before the project supposedly ended. I think it was in 1995.
See, these things don't end. This is
no, of course not. And none of the guys.
Asinine. Excuse me. This is the asininity of this whole remote viewing community and the whole shtick that goes with it. Well, it ended. It doesn't end. It's like, and these people, they claim that they were spies. They were doing spy work. And does a spy reveal his methods or methodology? No, he does not. A spy is a spy. He's secret. And these are guys coming out and saying, well, I did this and I did this. What are they doing? Sometimes they're trying to recruit other people who have real talent and to gather people, but they're not what they appear to be. And they come out and make these statements, and they should just shut up. They should follow the power of the Sphinx, which is silence. One of the four powers of the Sphinx. Just be silent. And of course, people will listen. And the listening audience of any audience, just by demographics, is incredibly gullible. Incredibly gullible. This is why television advertising works. And one cannot help it. If one sits there and watches TV and they keep playing a song, that song will go in your head. So when people are exposed to this subject, and this stuff, these projects don't end. They change names, and sometimes these people are sent out like they're no good anymore, so they don't use them anymore. But it's just like I can't listen to these people. because I know where they come from. And I'm speaking generally here, and I know there's specific people that have real talent, and the ones that have real talent generally aren't pontificating their abilities or their whys and wherefores and what they did. There's no need for that. The ones that are really talented are being used. Or using.
Right. Well, I'm sure they've got a brand new batch, because of course these guys, that we're talking about are all, older gentlemen now. So I'm sure they just have a brand new batch of talent in there doing their bidding. So, but anyhow, enough about them and enough about that. What's your next move with your research?
Well, I began a book. We were talking about astrology. I began a book that goes into it's an initiation into time, and it does relate to the stars, because we all come from stars. At least our physical aspects come from stars, and ancient man's relationship with the stars, but how all of that parlays into the evolution of astrology and the evolution of thinking and the evolution of how we interact with time. The book is designed to be an initiation into time, and if Synchronicity works right, it'll come out around the same time David Anderson starts releasing his videos on the subject of time. He's been trying to do that for a decade now. Maybe not a decade, maybe a half a decade.
What's stopping him?
Well, at one point it was his partners. And he spoke to me as recently as January and said that he's hoping to release these later this year. So I hope that he does. I know he said he would release them before, and it doesn't happen. There could be some shakeups and some changes in the way. So there's been a lot of restriction and bad reaction to what he's had to offer. I put his time reactor patent in the new book, The White Bat, as it follows the flow of what I experienced. And when I told him that, he was very happy that I put the patent in there. Now, I had gotten the patent sent to me some time ago from him when he was in India. DARPA India is the name of the facility he was working at. And in India, I believe it stands for David Anderson Research Partners and Associates. I think it's a quasi-government thing. Mm-hmm. The biggest labs in time travel are in near Mumbai. So anyway, this was, I had it on my website. It disappeared off my website. I didn't take it off. And I put it in the book, and he said that patent had been sequestered. In other words,
it's not accessible. You can't look it up.
It's not accessible anymore, but it has, the whole patent filing is right there, and you see it in the book, because there has been very poor reactions to his release of his information, certainly by certain key people in the UFO community who are really working for Satanists, as was exposed by Douglas Dietrich in some of his radio shows and interviews and YouTubes. And the UFO community isn't what people think it is. And I mean, almost nothing is what people think it is. But basically, these people react very poorly to Dr. David Anderson and his work. So what is this? What is this? It really gets to the point of ridiculousness and insanity. And this is something that I'm hoping will dissipate over the next 6 to 8 months as we move it through 2015. So that's the current project that I'm in the midst of. I also publish a quarterly newsletter, and that comes out every quarter with the equinoxes and the solstices. And that's what I'm working on currently.
That's fantastic. I hate to say this, but we are all out of time. I want to thank you, Peter Moon, and I hope you'll agree to come back again sometime, because I'm sure there's a whole host of things that we never even got to.
I'd be happy. We've just scratched the surface on many different topics.
Right. Well, I hope we get another chance then. That would be really nice.
I want to invite people again to my website, digitalmontauk.com, where they can access the free podcasts on the subject of remote viewing. There's another one coming up, and also skybooksusa.com if they would like to purchase any of the books that I've done. And there's Amazon as well, and Kindle.
Great. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hope you'll be here with me next week for another edition of Night Vision Radio. If I can speak by then, I sure will. I'll be here. Thanks so much.